When it comes to controversial video games, I struggle to think of a franchise that's been more controversial than Rockstar North's Grand Theft Auto. Sure, there have been individual games over the years that have been more controversial than some of the GTA entries, including Manhunt, which was also developed by Rockstar North, and is still a very brutal game by today's standards. But none have come close to the popularity or cultural impact that GTA has achieved over the last 30 years. Now, while I feel it's safe to say that GTA really skyrocketed in its popularity when GTA 3 dropped back in 2001, it's obviously not where the series started. And if you had a PlayStation 2 copy of GTA 3 when it came out, you'd notice that there is no Rockstar North logo on the back of the box, despite it being on the back of the Windows version. And while game franchises changing developers isn't anything new or exciting, I always thought it was quite strange that DMA just disappeared and Rockstar North took their place. So I thought it would be interesting to look back and play some of those earlier DMA entries and talk about the first GTA game, only to get drawn into the story of how a group of tech nerds from Scotland ended up going from making fun little games amongst themselves to making one of the funnest cute puzzle games in the 90s, to them making what would become one of the most controversial and successful video game franchises of all time. This is the story of DMA Design, the development studio that would turn into Rockstar North, and how they made Grand Theft Auto. But first to the origins of DMA Design, and it mainly traces back to one man, Dave Jones from Dundee, Scotland. Like many of us, Dave's passion for computers and gaming started just from playing video games as a kid instead of doing his schoolwork. And there was no shortage of arcade games for him to play at the time either, as the late 70s and early 80s saw a massive boom in arcade games like Space Invaders and Pac-Man. But his exposure to tech and gaming wasn't just limited to the arcades that he frequented. It just so happens that Dave's high school was one of the few in the UK at the time that offered classes on basic programming, with the school having received Apple IIs for the students to learn on, just as Dave was entering his teenage years. Obviously Dave took these classes, and it fueled his quickly growing interest for computers, but it wasn't just software that he was interested in. In 1981, Sinclair released the ZX81, an incredibly affordable home computer at the time costing only £69.95. But if you were tech savvy enough, or just straight ballsy enough, you could buy a disassembled kit that you had to solder together yourself. And it would save you about 20 quid, which was a perfect option for students like Dave who didn't have a huge expendable income to throw around on 3,000 quid systems. While the ZX81 was very basic and could only output in black and white, it was hugely popular around the UK, but even more so in Dundee, as they were being manufactured at a large Timex factory located right there in the city. Timex was, and still is, a watch manufacturer, but at the time they were struggling in the market with cheap and reliable watches coming from Asia, so they joined with Sinclair to manufacture their home computers and accessories. So when Dave finished high school, his experience with putting together one of those ZX81 computer kits helped him land a hardware engineer apprenticeship at the Timex factory. And for Dave, this was his dream job, where he got to build computers and accessories for them. The job also came with benefits, with the most important one to the story of GTA being that they offered to pay for programming courses at Kingsway Technical College if Dave wanted to take them. And you bet your ass he did. But the programming course wasn't the only thing that enticed Dave at Kingsway. The college also hosted an amateur computer club that anyone could join as long as they brought their own computer and monitor. And look, lugging around one of those big old CRT monitors was probably a pretty big deterrent for a lot of people, but it didn't deter Dave from showing up regularly. The club would host lectures on computer science, but it mainly served as a social gathering for computer enthusiasts to show and help out with software projects that they were working on. Dave would finish his apprenticeship after a few years, and he kept going to Kingsway for the programming courses and computer club. But in 1985, the Timex factory wasn't doing so good financially, and began offering voluntary redundancies for its workers. Now, while Dave liked his job, he could see that making a bunch of employees redundant wasn't going to solve the problems of the factory long term. Not only that, but the idea of going to university and getting a degree in software engineering got into his head, and it was getting more and more appealing by the day. So he decided to take the redundancy payout and go to uni doing software engineering, despite his parents advising him against it. But he also decided to spend a very large chunk of that redundancy payout on an Amiga 1000, which he argued to his parents was an investment, despite it really just being something that he could play flashy new games on. The Amiga 1000 apparently cost him £3,000 when he bought it, with its high price mainly being due to him having to import one from the US as it wasn't actually available to buy in the UK at the time. According to the Bank of England's inflation calculator, that's about £9,500 in 2026 money, which is $12,700 just to play world-class leaderboard. Jesus Christ, look at them graphics, they're coming right at us. Oh, get fucked, you dog. Dave showed his new Amiga off at the Computer Club, and it blew everyone's minds with its impressive graphics. And by 1986, he had a pretty tight-knit group of friends at the club, which included Russell Kay, Steve Hammond, and Mike Daly. I feel like it's worth noting here that Mike Daly's website, lemmings.info, is where I'm getting a lot of this early history from, alongside with old photos used in this video, so special shout out to him. Anyway, the four of them were very passionate and focused on video games, whereas a lot of the other people at the club saw games as more of a distraction and a bit of a waste of time. The four of them were all working on their own game projects as well, but being the good friends they would help each other out where they could, and sometimes even work more collaboratively. Dave's focus was on a game for his Amiga 1000, and it was a shoot 'em up called CopperCon 1, which was inspired by Konami's Salamander. He had plenty of time to work on it as well, because his software engineering degree was very easy for him at its current early stages. As the guys all worked on their own projects, the group was getting bigger and bigger, and it even included a guy who didn't even live in Dundee called Tony Smith, an artist who was involved with the Amiga demo scene, and he would make art assets for Dave's game. With CopperCon 1 no longer being a one-man show, Dave realised that he couldn't just release it under his own name, so he came up with Acme Software to release the game under. With Tony's artwork, the game was getting better and better, and Dave decided that he was going to look for a publisher for it instead of just releasing it independently. He did find some interest from a few publishers, but he decided to go with the relatively new publisher Psygnosis, simply because they were the closest one to Dundee. Despite not having worked with a publisher before, or even finishing making a game in its entirety yet, he ended up signing a 6-game contract with them, with CopperCon 1 being the first game in that contract. Now, while Psygnosis was the closest publisher to Dundee, they were located all the way in Liverpool, which was a 4.5-hour drive away. Fortunately, he didn't need to make the drive too often, but when he did, his Computer Club pals, Mike and Steve, would tag along to make the drive a little bit more entertaining. Psygnosis liked how CopperCon 1 was coming along, but they decided to change the name to Draconia, because, well, CopperCon 1 is a pretty shitty name, let's be real. After it was renamed though, Dave and Tony went into overdrive to get it finished. But it turns out that Draconia wasn't the only name that needed to be changed either. As it turns out, Acme had already been taken as well, so Dave came up with the name DMA Design to release the game under. While later in DMA's life, staff would joke that it stood for doesn't mean anything, which was technically true I guess, but Dave actually just took it out of an Amiga manual, and it stood for Direct Memory Access. Don't worry mate, it's not like this is going to be a huge company that changes gaming forever or anything. But the naming issues didn't even end there. As Dave was finishing up Draconia, 2 games came out with very similar names. One was Dragonia, and another was Draconus. So Psygnosis thought another name change was in order to avoid confusing customers. Dave decided to call it Menace, thinking that it was a good idea to give games common words or phrases as names to make it stick in people's minds just a little bit more. Funnily enough, in the 1988 July issue of Commodore User, they actually published a review of the game with the name Draconia. I'd like to imagine there was some kid out there who read this and got hell excited for the game, only to never find it in stores and be disappointed. But regardless, Menace was released for the Amiga in October 1988, and it got pretty decent reviews from publications. The game has players flying a spacecraft on the planet of Draconia, progressing through 6 different stages to destroy the planet's guardians. Hey, this motherfucker's trying to kill me by busting fat nuts on me! The game definitely is a product of its time however. Playing Menace today, I found its first 3 levels pretty fun, being a pretty standard shoot 'em up, but then the 4th level just hits you with a massive difficulty spike, where enemies feel more cheap, dealing unavoidable damage. I mean, just look at this bullshit, how the hell am I meant to get through here without taking a little bit of damage? You don't get any sort of feedback when you take damage either, so you often don't even realise that you're getting low on health until you just suddenly die. That being said, the game's visuals are pretty good for the time though, taking advantage of the Amiga's parallax scrolling capabilities, and having some cool enemy designs that you need to take out. The planned life on Siakano's got me acting unwise. The game's soundtrack is also pretty good, but you'll probably get sick of it as you get frustrated with the game's harder levels. I'm not gonna lie, I couldn't finish this game without cheating. And looking at these later levels, I don't think I would have been able to beat it without cheating anyway. That being said, it does seem like a decent amount of people did actually really enjoy playing Menace when it came out. While I couldn't find any solid sales numbers, it sold somewhere between 5,000 and 20,000 copies, depending on your source. and Dave got a fat 75p for each copy sold. While looking back on it, Dave recognises that he got a pretty bad deal from Psygnosis on the game, but at the time he was pretty damn happy with what he was getting. His computer group pals were all pretty happy that not only did one of them get a game properly published, but it was also getting good reviews and it was selling well. This all helped drive Dave to start working on a sequel to Menace, which would be titled Blood Money. After all, he did have to make at least 5 more games to fulfill his contract with Psygnosis. But, as he got further into developing Blood Money, his software engineering degree was no longer a walk in the park, and it was taking a whole lot more effort to get through. It was becoming pretty clear pretty fast to Dave that balancing his degree with making games was becoming less sustainable and wasn't going to work out. He had gotten to the point that while attending lectures at uni, he would just be sitting at the back of the room programming instead of actually paying attention to the lecturer. So realizing that, he decided to drop out of his software engineering degree and actually try to make a living out of creating video games. Again, his parents didn't think this was a good idea. The general consensus at the time was that there really wasn't any money in video games, and they were more of a hobby that you would make a little cash on the side from. Despite this, they were overall quite supportive of Dave's hobby, and they did respect his decision. Probably because if he wasn't doing that, he'd probably be doing the new #1 hobby in Scotland at the time. Heroin! But it was also around this time that Mike Daly had also dropped out of his college degree, and was hanging out with Dave a lot during the day, where they both worked on their games. Mike was working on a game called Talisman, and while it would eventually be scrapped, some of the code he wrote would be taken and used in Blood Money. Mike was understandably trying to find some direction in his life after dropping out of college, and it was now that Dave asked Mike if he would work for him if he got an office for DMA design. Making games was Mike's passion, and making them professionally as a job, that was his dream, so he was definitely keen to join. And with that, Dave set out on trying to get an office for his small development team. Luckily for him, his father-in-law actually owned a small office on the second floor of a baby shop that was also just across the road from his own fish and chip shop. So Dave set up DMA's office there and started to take on his computer club friends as actual employees. And this is the real beginning of DMA design. More people were hired, but most of the staff at DMA in these early stages just worked on porting games to Psygnosis to other PC systems, with the exception of Dave and Tony, who were just focusing on Blood Money.
First, there was Menace. Now, Psygnosis presents a DMA design game.
It released in April 1989, and reviews of the game on release were better than Menace's. While being another shoot 'em up, its gameplay improved on what Menace had done before. The screen scrolled in more than one direction. You could turn around and shoot targets coming from behind you. There were more enemies, and they came at you in a much more organic way instead of how things in Menace just sort of appeared out of nowhere. Blood Money's difficulty is absolutely brutal though. There are so many enemies and projectiles coming at you from every direction, and you're often in quite narrow areas where you can't really dodge anything. Also, when you die, you lose all of your upgrades, and the shops to buy them back can be pretty far apart. It doesn't help that the game pretty much just throws enemies at you as if it expects you to be fully upgraded throughout the entire game. It really just feels like one of those games where you just have to memorize every second of the levels through trial and error. And the levels aren't small either. Each one is close to a 15-minute crawl that you can't speed up. If you haven't guessed it yet, I'm not the biggest fan of Blood Money, but to be fair, shoot 'em up games aren't really my jam to begin with maybe the exception of Raptor, Call of the Shadows. But the genre was massive at the time, and because of that, Blood Money did pretty well. The game apparently sold twice as much as Menace, so people were definitely digging what DMA was putting out. Right after Blood Money was released, Dave went on to join in development of another game called Walker, which new hire Scott Johnson was also working on. As the game's name implies, Walker has the player control a mechanized walker going around destroying everything in sight. Scott was working on creating people for the walker to kill, and when Mike Daly saw what he had made, the two got into a heated discussion. Mike thought the character models were too big, as they were pretty much coming up to the walker's cockpit, destroying any sense of scale that the walker had. Whereas Scott argued that they needed to be that size, so they had identifiable features and better animation. At the end of their heated discussion, Mike set out to make a character model that was only 8 pixels high, identifiable, while still being decently animated. What he made ended up being 10 pixels high, but it checked all the other boxes. He went to the guys at the office and he showed these little animations off he did of the characters dying, and they all thought it was hilarious. Especially Gary Timmons, who took what Mike had done, refined the animation to make it look smoother and more lifelike, and then added a couple other little animations of them dying to share with the office. I really like this one with the mouth eating them, because these days it just kind of looks like some sort of Gen Z creepypasta horror villain. Anyway, the guys at the DMA office thought the animations were hilarious, and they enjoyed coming up with new ways to kill the little guys that Mike had made. Someone pointed out that there was definitely the early makings of a game here somewhere, and with that, a new game slowly started its development at DMA. The Walker game wasn't turning out to be what Dave had envisioned, so it was shelved while Mike and Gary's animations became Lemmings, which pretty much everyone at DMA would work on, even if they just made a couple of levels for it. Its name no doubt came from the actual real-life rodents called lemmings, which have long had myths surrounding them that they run off cliffs or drown themselves together in large groups. This myth isn't true, by the way, but a lot of people thought it was thanks to a 1958 documentary by Disney called White Wilderness, where the crew forced hundreds of lemmings off a cliff, killing them all, and saying that the lemmings did it themselves. Yeah, just a reminder that Disney has always been a fucking evil company. Anyway, they finally managed to finish making Lemmings and released it on February 14th, 1991, and it was a pretty simple puzzle game where you would guide a group of small creatures called lemmings to safety. You'd navigate them through deadly hazards including sheer cliff faces that they would happily walk off if you let them. So to help them reach their destination, you could tell them to dig, climb, parachute with umbrellas, or even just stop other lemmings from walking in one direction. If you mess things up completely, you could hit a nuke button just to kill all the lemmings remaining. But there is also a bomb power-up that you can use on a single lemming if you need to. I think it's kind of funny that you're probably going to use this to end the life of a lemming that saved almost all of the others by blocking a path. They expect one of us in the wreckage, brother. On release, Lemmings was getting rave reviews from critics for its simple gameplay, alongside being a family-friendly game meant that anyone could easily play and enjoy it, even if you did just like hitting the nuke button that killed all the lemmings on screen. Yeah, bet if Walt Disney was alive and Lemmings came out, he'd just be hitting that button non-stop. But you gotta remember, it was pretty common for families to gather around the family PC and play puzzle or adventure games together in the 90s, trying to figure out how to get through them together, and Lemmings was perfect for that audience. So parents had no problems buying DMA's latest release for birthday presents or Christmas gifts, which is kind of funny when you know exactly what they were going to put out on the market years later. But on Lemmings release day, Psygnosis would call the DMA office up every hour to tell Dave how many copies had been sold. 10,000 turned into 20,000, and then 30,000, 40,000, before at the end of the day it finally hit 55,000 copies sold on its first day. The highest estimate for Blood Money sales had been 40,000 over 2 years, and Lemmings has shattered that in one day. Lemmings was absolutely everywhere, and hell, I even remember it being on some of my school's computers in 2003, which was pretty insane that it was still around on computers that long after release. I mean, think about it. Playing a single game for 12 years. Insane. Over 15 years, Lemmings sold somewhere between 15 to 20 million copies worldwide, which is pretty insane for a game that came out in 91. Its high sales were definitely helped by the fact that it was ported to almost any system that you can think of, including everyone's favourite console, the Philips CDI.
My boy!
With a success that big, Psygnosis didn't want Lemmings to go to waste, so a map pack called Oh No More Lemmings was made, which added 100 new levels to get through. After that, DMA did get back to making Walker, and it released in 1993, and was praised for its graphics, but its gameplay isn't very exciting. Like, it's a cool concept for the time, but it's just very repetitive, and it gets boring quite quick. But hey, now I know that it was a side-scrolling shooter that let the player use their mouse to aim while moving with the keyboard or joystick before abuse. Oh god, I'm painfully aware of that now. Later in that same year, DMA released Lemmings 2, The Tribes, which added some new features and generally is a better game than the original in my opinion, but it doesn't change much from the formula. It got great reviews and did sell really well, but it wasn't as popular as the first game. It probably didn't help that they were releasing a holiday expansion for the first game not long after Lemmings 2 was released. They followed up Lemmings 2 with a third Lemmings game in 1994 called All New World of Lemmings, or Lemmings Chronicles in America, which again, it got decent reviews, but not as good as the previous two games, and its sales are apparently pretty bad compared to its predecessors. Dave would later say that looking back, Lemmings Chronicles was a bit shit, but it did achieve a major milestone for the company, being that it was the last game that DMA had to make to free them from their contract with Psygnosis, that Dave had signed with them when making Menace. As you can probably imagine, the crew at DMA were getting pretty sick and tired of making Lemmings games. Not that it mattered if they weren't, because Psygnosis had the rights to Lemmings anyway. But that didn't matter, because they had already managed to impress Nintendo of all companies at a trade show with a full motion video demo running on the Super Nintendo. They signed a contract with Nintendo to create a launch title for their upcoming console known as Project Reality at the time. Project Reality would be announced to the public as the Nintendo Ultra 64 before finally being renamed to the Nintendo 64. DMA had a good idea for their 64 launch title as well, with a game called Body Harvest, and its development went incredibly smoothly, with no problems whatsoever, and Nintendo was happy with it from beginning to end. Body Harvest is a game I want to cover someday, so I'm not going to talk about it too much in this video. But while most of the staff at DMA started getting to work on it, our good friend Mike Daly was put in the R&D side of DMA to basically just fuck around and come up with new ideas, and this is where we finally start getting to GTA. In 1995, the industry was charging headfirst into the third dimension, whether game developers liked it or not. The PlayStation was already out in Japan, impressing gamers with its 3D capabilities. PCs were rapidly getting more powerful to the point where they could render real-time 3D graphics. Nintendo had the 64 coming out in a year, which was laser focused on 3D, and Sega had the Saturn. I mean, I know it has a cult following now, and you could technically do 3D really well on it, but they really did drop the ball on that one, didn't they? That's besides the point. 3D was here, and until people started getting nostalgic for 2D games in 10 years, every big developer was going to have to learn how to make 3D games now. So Mike decided to play around with building a 3D city by pretty much just stacking blocks on top of each other, making buildings that would be viewed from an isometric perspective. His first idea was to have the player control a dinosaur that would run around and destroy the city. To give the city more life, he added some cars that would drive around that the player could destroy, and he started showing his work to some of the guys at the studio. One of them said that it would be pretty fun if you could just drive around in one of the cars instead of playing as a dinosaur. Why they didn't suggest playing as a dinosaur that hijacks cars and causes chaos is beyond me, but regardless, the change was made, and by now Mike had a demo where you could drive around a 3D city. The base tech for a game had been developed, but now they actually had to think of a game to make. They had a city and cars to drive around it, and it just so happened that a bunch of the guys at DMA had been trying to pitch a racing game to Dave Jones for years now, but he had never been interested in making one. Dave loved cars, driving, and the idea of driving games, but he hated racing games at the time because in his eyes they were all pretty much the same, and there was no innovation. So the team pitched the game as a simulation of a city that they built, allowing players to choose their own path, either playing as a police officer chasing down bad guys, or alternatively, play as the bad guys and try to evade police. And Dave liked the idea, especially the fact that you would be able to get out of your current vehicle, run to another one, and take it and drive off. Not to mention, it had the sandbox feel where players could approach things how they wanted to, giving them the ability to solve problems in their own way. He also just liked how it felt driving cars in the game, calling it Zoom as you vroom, where the camera would just zoom out, letting you see more around you as you drove faster. The game got the name Race and Chase, and Dave liked it so much that he showed it off to a potential new publisher called BMG Interactive. Now BMG was a massive music company that was trying to break into the booming video games market. Their biggest game at this point was Gex, and while that game may be a bit of a meme these days, it certainly wasn't making BMG Interactive a force to be reckoned with. They signed a contract with DMA to publish Race and Chase, as well as a couple of other games which were being worked on at the same time as Body Harvest. With the game's basic concept figured out and a publisher behind it, it was time for a dedicated team at DMA to focus on Race and Chase, and make it an actual game. Fortunately, the new publishing deal with BMG meant a cash injection, which pretty much went to hiring more staff and expanding their offices. As they were building the in-game cities and features were slowly being added in, the development team started to focus on how they thought the in-game world should react to the player's actions. Being able to run around and take any car you wanted was a pretty unique feature at the time, but if you were to take a parked vehicle, it only made sense that it would set off an alarm, and if you injured someone on one of your joyrides, it should be expected that an ambulance would show up to revive and financially cripple the person you struck down. And hell, an ambulance is just another vehicle that you should be able to take, and if you do hijack it, you should be able to flick on the sirens to make other drivers swerve out of the way. This kind of cyclical design process is really what drove the design team, and they really enjoyed making the cities actual living, breathing spaces that players interacted with. But as features kept coming in, they realized that no one was playing as the cops. It was boring, and just kinda lame. Why would you want to play as a good guy and be restricted by morality when instead you could run red lights, mow down pedestrians, and of course, kill feds? so the whole good guy side of the game was scrapped and Race and Chase became a full-on crim sim. But it was also around this time that Bullfrog dropped Syndicate Wars, which featured 3D city maps played from an isometric perspective as well. And after playing a bit of it, Mike decided that the whole isometric 3D perspective was a terrible idea and needed to be scrapped. So the game's perspective was shifted to a top-down view, with Mike essentially making a side-scroller. He managed to salvage his 3D tech and cleverly used it with different parallax layers to create 3D buildings that came out of the ground, much in the same way newer side-scrollers would have 3D platforms coming out from the background into the foreground. As development continued, they ditched the name Race and Chase and decided to go with the new Grand Theft Auto. But even with the game's focus found, its development was going anything but smoothly. It was a bug-ridden mess, and there were fears that GTA was going to have the same fate as many of DMA's other projects that never saw the light of day. Part of this fear was rooted in the fact that it had been 3 years since DMA had actually released anything, and the company's coffers were starting to run dry. Apparently, Dave Jones was signing DMA up to make games for publishers that they had no hope of making or finishing, just to get a signing bonus to keep the company afloat. They were going so far that apparently they made fake development teams just to hide the fact they had no intentions of actually making the games they signed on for. The company's financial situation was really amplified by the fact that their big blockbuster game they were actually working on, Body Harvest, was going nowhere. It missed the Nintendo 64's launch, and Nintendo would later cut its losses, dropping their publishing deal with DMA in 1997, putting that game's future into question. To be fair to DMA, Body Harvest's hellish development cycle was more to do with issues with Nintendo not really knowing what they wanted from the company. But with DMA getting closer to collapse, Dave met with Gremlin Interactive, and he managed to make a deal with them to save the company. Gremlin would purchase DMA for £4 million so they could keep making games, but they needed to become profitable in 2 years, and they needed to hurry the hell up and release something. With the sale going through in April 1997, the GTA team went into crunch mode to finish the game, and it was in these last 6 months that the game really started to come together. However, as GTA finally started coming together and its release was starting to materialise, DMA had to start thinking about marketing it to the public, and the team was worried about the controversy that might surround the game when the public sees it. Now looking back, it's obvious that the game's controversy really drove sales, but Dave Jones states that their goal with GTA was never to create controversy or shock audiences. Its gameplay had simply evolved from people playing what they had made and saying, "Wouldn't it be cool if this happened because I did that?" And DMA wasn't really ready or equipped to deal with the controversy at the time, and it was obvious that GTA was going to be stirring up a lot, so they talked to their publisher BMG Interactive about it. Fortunately for them, BMG was used to dealing with PR and controversy due to their experience in the music industry, and they thought the best thing to do with any controversy that might arise around GTA would be to embrace it. So BMG hired a publicist named Max Clifford to deal with the controversy that the game might cause. Now Max Clifford was a pretty notorious figure in the UK media, the kind of guy that doesn't let the truth get in the way of a good story, or as the world would discover decades later, wouldn't let consent get in the way of a good time. But in the 90s, this guy could pretty much command the media to run stories and headlines that would attract insane amounts of public attention to whatever person or thing he was trying to get in the public eye. And while DMA didn't set out to cause controversy, Dave knew how beneficial having someone like Max would be for getting the game noticed before it came out. Apparently Max told Dave that he had a plan to say certain things to certain people in the media and in politics. This would cause outrage, which would then have the game be brought up in a speech in the British House of Lords, which would then have breakfast TV and radio hosts talking about it, and according to Dave, Max's plan worked out to the exact days he mentioned, and all this controversy just generated hype around the game, just as they had planned. It was Lord Campbell of Croy which brought GTA up in the House of Lords on May 20th, 1997, criticising its content and talking about how it would be harmful to the youth. You know, just the standard shit that old folks who hated video games would say back then. But after his speech, it didn't take long for one of the world's most respected journalistic institutions, the Daily Mail, to run a headline saying, "Criminal computer game that glorifies hit-and-run thugs," and then another one from News of the World simply saying, "Ban criminal video game." The controversy looked bad, and it's important to remember that at this stage, DMA was best known for a family-friendly puzzle game. But as BMG anticipated, it really just drove up hype and it got the game's name out there into the public's eye, even for people that didn't even play video games at the time. The controversy did get the game banned in Brazil, on top of getting an 18+ rating in the UK, but that didn't stop DMA from finally releasing Grand Theft Auto on November 28, 1997, just in time for the Christmas season. There isn't much of an introduction to GTA. The game opens up and you pick a character out of a diverse cast of boys and girls, which really just shows that GTA was woke and gay from the beginning, and these guys online don't know shit. It doesn't really matter who you pick, as it just changes your in-game model and acts as a way of tracking your high scores and progress. So picking one of the black characters isn't going to give you a permanent 1-star wanted level, and playing as a female doesn't mean you can't parallel park anymore. But what the fuck? After picking your character, you're thrown into the game's first chapter, Gangsta Bang, which sounds like an interracial gay porn title now that I think about it. Gangsta Bang takes place in Liberty City, which is heavily inspired by New York City, and you're just thrown into an open world sandbox that really does just let you do whatever the hell you want from the word go. You do have an objective, and it's very simple. You just need to get a certain amount of points, which lets you progress to the next chapter. In Gangsta Bang, you need to get 1 million points to progress to the next stage, and you get them from all the criminal acts you commit. Damaging cars gives you 10 points, stealing one or killing a civilian gives you 100, and killing a cop gives you the most, awarding 1000 points. Now 1 million points means you're going to have to kill at least 1000 cops, which is going to get pretty boring pretty fast. But fortunately, you do have a bonus multiplier that you can increase by either finding pickups scattered around the city, or by completing missions. The first missions you're going to come across are probably going to be at the payphones that the game directs you to. And in Liberty City, you'll be doing jobs for the Vakota crime family. They involve standard criminal stuff like being a getaway driver for a bank heist, killing Hell's Angels and stealing their bikes, and driving a tanker filled with explosives to a police station to kill the new police chief. You know, standard stuff. Naturally, through the mayhem you cause, it attracts the attention of law enforcement. Yeah, I wonder why. So the cops will try to stop you, and if they manage to arrest you, you'll lose all of your weapons and your bonus multiplier will be halved, which is really devastating. That is unless you have a get out of jail free card on hand, which lets you keep all your weapons and leaves your precious multiplier untouched. All the cops have to do to arrest you is hit you once with their police bat or open your car door when you're inside, which can happen very quickly, so you have to be careful if you're wanted by them and they're nearby. Once cops start hunting you down, they will not stop either. Having one wanted level is manageable, with cops only chasing you if you drive past them. Once your wanted level hits 2 though, they get much more relentless with hunting you down, and you're gonna struggle to do any mission that involves anything more than driving and running people over. At level 3 they'll set up blockades around the city to halt you, and at the max wanted level of 4 they'll use machine guns to take you down. There are a few ways to lose the cherries and berries though. The easiest way to get rid of them, and what has become a staple in the GTA series, all the way up until 5, is the humble spray shop. Driving through one of these instantly clears your wanted level back to 0, while also giving you a flashing new paint job and repairing any damage on your car. It does come at the cost of some of your points, but it's not so much, so you can use these things liberally. There are also cop bribes in some of the crates scattered around the city that will clear your wanted level, but they are single use, and if you accidentally pick one up when your wanted level is at 0, they will still be used up, so they are a bit harder to rely on than the spray shops. The only other way to clear your wanted level is by successfully completing a mission, which is kind of funny when you just slam your car into a garage with cops chasing you and they suddenly just give up. But getting busted isn't the only problem. You can also get killed, or wasted as the game calls it. Getting wasted respawns you at a nearby hospital. You lose all your weapons and a life, but your bonus multiplier stays the same, so getting wasted is often better than getting busted by the cops. And while you can technically just grind your way to the score requirement, even with no multiplier, if it's slow it's going to take you way too long and you're just going to want to hold F4 before you even get close. So if you don't have a get out of jail free card, just die instead of getting arrested. Going back to the missions though, the ones in Gangsta Bang are pretty simple and pretty much just lay out the mission archetypes that you'll be doing over and over again. You only get 4 from the payphones, but as you're driving around, you'll get little pager notifications, seemingly at random, that will inform you of a vehicle of interest in a specific area that you might want to check out. Now when you see these and realise that they're telling you to go somewhere, your first thought is probably going to be something like, where the fuck is Northeast Fort Law? And you're going to have no idea because there's no in-game map. The game does tell you where you are when you enter new areas, so you can eventually memorize where places are, but every area in Liberty City pretty much looks the same, and often you're going to be driving around so fast you're not going to notice the text telling you where you are, making navigation a little bit rough at times. And all the city streets in Liberty City looking the same isn't the only problem with the game's visuals either. GTA's graphics were not very impressive when the game came out. Hell, I remember when I first played it, I thought it was way older than it actually was. Now graphics aren't a huge deal for a lot of people today, and I don't think they matter if the game has a good art direction. But this was not a common sentiment in the mid-90s. Gamers were frothing every new graphical improvement that made games look more realistic, and developers seem to love pushing the limits of what could be done with current hardware, so GTA's bad graphics was a huge mark against it at the time. But some of the visuals do affect gameplay. One of the most annoying things in GTA has to be these street signs and fences, which are just 2D models poking out of the ground like sheets of paper that you will crash into because they're pretty much impossible to see when you get close to them. The other incredibly annoying thing about the visuals is the camera. On foot it's fine, but when you get into a vehicle it zooms out depending on your speed. But as you can probably see in my gameplay footage here, this change happens constantly and rapidly. When you're thanging it down the street at full speed and the camera is zoomed out all the way, it's fine. But as soon as you slow down to take a turn or bump into something, it just zooms right back in and you can't see shit that's in front of you. And this just gets really fucking annoying really fast, especially when you're in an area that has a little bit more traffic in it. It just feels like it's impossible not to be constantly crashing into cars or shit on the sidewalk, because the camera is just jerking back and forth constantly, as if Michael J. Fox is holding it or something. Like, I understand the appeal of the camera zooming out as you get faster, and I do see why Dave Jones liked the idea, but I imagine when the game was pitched to him that there was a whole lot less shit on the screen that would stop him in his tracks. Aside from those issues, the visuals do their job well enough, despite not being great for the time. For me, they are very memorable though, because every time I reverse my car in real life and I get this top-down view, I can't help but think of Grand Theft Auto. Oh, this is bullshit, officer, I didn't do anything! But going back to the game, and the issues of finding your way around the cities, GTA did come packaged with an actual physical map of all the cities in the game, and it feels like you're expected that you have this by your side while playing. So if you decide to play it today, don't hesitate to have one up on your second monitor or your mobile or whatever. You're gonna need it if you don't want to get frustrated. Especially if you're trying to find one of the vehicles that the page of messages are pointing you towards. If you do manage to find one of those vehicles and jump inside them, you get another mission. I love how the guys giving you these missions just seem to have total utter contempt for you, as if you aren't taking on extremely dangerous tasks that could end with everyone involved dead or in jail. Most of these missions pretty much play out the same as the phone missions, with the exception of a few, like this coach.
I'm about to bust right now. I'm about to bust. Oh my god. I'm about to blow. No.
And everyone in the 90s just had to make a speed reference when there was a bust, didn't they? All of the missions are pretty fun to go through, but they do have one glaring issue, and that's if you fail them, that's it. They're gone. You gotta restart the whole level from 0 points if you want to try them again. Now, you don't need to successfully complete every mission to get enough points to go to the next chapter, but the gameplay is pretty fast, and when you're trying not to get your ass busted by the cops, it's pretty easy to miss some of the details in the text telling you what to do between objectives. Oh, wasn't meant to kill that guy? Oops. I guess I have to restart the whole goddamn chapter again. When you hit the point requirement to finish the chapter, you get a red arrow telling you where to go to finish it. You don't have to go there straight away, so if you have more missions that you want to do, you can just go do them, letting you 100% the level before you move on. I'm not about that 100% lifestyle though. Gangsta Bang ends with us meeting the right-hand man of Don Cinetti, the rival family to the Vicottis.
Hey, Aruzo, I got a warning for you from Bald Man Cinetti. Cross him again, I'll stick a gun up your ass and blow your f***ing eyeballs out. Capiche?
Despite his warnings, most of the missions in the next chapter, Heist Almighty, are pretty much just us fucking with the Cinettis again. Now, if you do randomly come across the Cinettis in game now, they do open fire on you, which I thought was a nice world building touch that never happens again in the entire game. Now, this chapter takes place in Liberty City again, but all the crates that provide buffs and weapons have been moved around alongside the payphones and vehicles you get missions from. I remember back in the day, a friend of mine marked down all the locations of most of the stuff he found in Gangsta Bang on the physical map that came with the game, only for that info to be useless in the second chapter. But after finishing the first chapter, you should be much more familiar with the layout of Liberty City anyway, but because of this, the missions are a bit harder, and you now need 2 million points to progress to the next chapter. Plenty of time to cruise around listening to the radio stations while pedestrians yell obscenities towards you.
Hey, screw you, asshole!
Radio stations are another staple of GTA, and it was a pretty cool feature in the first game as well. But unlike every GTA release after the first game, it didn't have any licensed music. Instead, all of it was written and recorded in-house, mainly by Colin Anderson, Craig Connor, and Robert De Niro. Whoa! I shouldn't say that. It turns out that's just his in-game alias anyway, and his actual name is Jonathan Wilson. Apparently the idea of in-game radio stations that played different music was a difficult pitch to the team as well, but they managed to convince him by explaining how they could use it to reinforce stereotypes about people who drive certain cars. Jump into a muscle car, and it's going to be blasting some 80s hair metal. If you get in someone's pickup truck, you would expect nothing less than some shitty country or western music playing, which is absolutely the reason why I never get into one of them. But if you are determined enough, you can mess around with the in-game files and change it to something a little more fitting.
18 naked cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch.
The soundtrack might not be the biggest, but they did write some solid tracks that fit the game, with tracks like 4 Letter Love and the Ballad of Chapped Lips Calhoun acting as funny parodies, and other tracks acting as a window into what was blowing up in the music world at the time. The song Just Do It sounds like it could have been taken straight from the Prodigy's debut album, Music for the Jilted Generation, and it absolutely pumps you up when you grab some poor fucker's car and it's blasting while you try to outrun the cops. Speaking of outrunning the cops, by the end of Heist Almighty, we meet with Big Man Vacotti, who tells us there's too much heat in us for all the mayhem we've caused. He is thankful for our services, so he gets us a ticket to San Andreas where we can lay low for a bit.
Nice work, kid, but the shit's hit the f***ing fan. The cops are crawling up my ass with flashlights looking for you. I booked you a flight to San Andreas.
Chapter 3, Mandarin Mayhem, is a breath of fresh air, a new city to explore inspired by San Francisco. So, you can expect the husk of a city that's had its soul slowly drained out of it over the years until it's nothing but a hollowed out shell of what used to be a vibrant place that had a massive influence on countercultural movements globally. And as the chapter's name implies, we are now working for the Chinese, with Uncle Fu's crime syndicate. And once again we get missions from payphones in a hub at the centre of the city. The missions are a lot funnier in nature. For example, we have to deal with an angry laundromat owner who doesn't want to pay protection money called Fu Ming, or deal with Uncle Fu's traitorous nephew, No Chin, by killing his newly formed gang, and eventually take him out as he tries to escape the city. And I just love how the Syndicate thanks you for completing missions, saying shit like, "May the 10 sacred virgins shower you with lotus blossom," or "May the Emperor's own concubines sing you to sleep." Man, I wish my boss at work said shit like that to me every time I did something. The random vehicle missions are gone now, but once you finish all the payphone missions in the central market, a new set of payphone missions open up in the south side of the city, regardless of if you passed or failed the other ones, so that makes up for the random vehicle missions being gone. But once again, the missions here are a lot harder, and they go for longer, giving you less room for error. It's pretty easy just to quickly and suddenly fail a mission in GTA. The cops can quickly bust you, but now you start getting missions where opposing gangs are shooting at you, and if you get hit by one bullet in GTA, you're dead, unless you have body armor, and even then it only takes 4 hits. Now what makes the shootouts hard is that even when you're on foot, the game uses tank controls, and you can't strafe, so dodging bullets and trying to shoot back can be awkward as fuck, making you kinda have to rely on baiting enemies around corners to shoot them. I also had this bug where if I was too close to my target, neither of our shots would actually register, which does kinda look funny, but it was annoying. But I think this bug may have been more related to DOS simulation instead of DMA's coding. If you die, it doesn't always fail the mission, often giving you another chance, but if the mission has a timer on it, and by now a lot of them do have tight timers on them, you pretty much don't have a chance to complete the objective on time. Because of this, Mandarin Mayhem took me a long time to get through, but with each playthrough I was streamlining and optimizing the start of the chapter more and more, much like a speedrunner perfecting their routes in games. This was until I pretty much didn't need the map on my second monitor, knowing exactly where armor, jail free cards, and spray shops were off the top of my head. Shout out to this spray shop right next to the bridge, it got a lot of business from me. The process of restarting and playing through it again is frustrating, but when you get that run where you just nail the missions, it does get you pretty pumped.
Mission complete!
But even then, I'll be real, as soon as I hit the 2 million points I needed to finish this chapter, I was pretty fucking keen just to get through it then and there, instead of doing any other missions. So at the end of Mandarin Mayhem, we meet with Uncle Fu, who's very appreciative of our work, and we show how happy we are working with him by working with the Latino gangs in the next chapter, Tequila Slammer.
You honor our family. You have our gratitude.
Taking place in San Andreas again, the missions here once again get harder and longer, but there are some damn fun ones like this one where you gotta kill 8 cops in 8 minutes. I'll be honest though, after having to restart Mandarin Mayhem constantly, I didn't feel up to the task of replaying through the same missions over and over again from the beginning of the chapter. So I started using save states from here on, saving whenever I completed a mission, using them like checkpoints. And I know that some people have the mentality that save states are for scumbags and you should always play the game as it was made, but honestly it made the game much more enjoyable to use them as checkpoints, so I would recommend it once you hit Mandarin Mayhem if you decide to play GTA. And you will need them, because once you finish To Kill a Slammer and get rewarded with a lust-filled night with the donkey, it's off to the final city, Vice City, in Bent Cop Blues. Vice City is my favourite map in the first GTA. Based off Miami, it blends what works with Liberty City and San Andreas into one map and gets rid of a lot of the negatives, such as Liberty City's streets all looking the same and San Andreas' annoying fences and elevation. But the missions in both Vice City chapters are insane. In Bent Cop Blues, we are working for a corrupt cop named Diva who has evidence on all the chaos we have caused in the other two cities, so now we do his dirty work, such as stealing his kids back from his ex-wife, who is probably dead now. Jesus man, I just wanted to kill feds. But mainly in this chapter, we target the Rockstar gang who are trying to move into Diva's turf. The missions here are long, with a lot of chapters, and you don't get anything unless you successfully finish every part of them. Going back to Mandarin Mayhem, the No Chin missions was broken into 3 parts, where each one gave you points and a multiplier when you finished them. But the missions in Bent Cop Blues often have more than 3 different stages, and if you fail the 4th or 5th one, you don't get shit for everything else. And some of these objectives are pretty tough to get through. This one mission where you have to kill a bunch of Rastas doing a deal at the docks, but without destroying the limousines behind them, took me fucking ages, and it almost felt like it came down to luck. As mentioned before, aiming your guns with tank controls is kind of shitty, and it really just comes down to spray and pray, hoping your bullets connect with the enemy before they gun you down. Doing that though risks blowing up the cars behind them, so you gotta try accurately hit them while they start shooting at you before you can even see them. Some of these guys don't seem to be able to be baited around the corner either, so it just kind of feels bullshit. But there are a lot of missions here, 16 in total, so failing these hard missions isn't a run killer. But it's still pretty rough, and you do only have a certain amount of lives before your run is over, so save states really are the way to go here in my opinion. After hitting 3 million points, which took me almost 3 hours using save states, we go to meet up with Diva, who claims he's heard of rumours of us working behind his back, and they better not be true or he's gonna fuck us up bad.
You listen to me, you 2-bit motherfucker, sucker! I hear you're working behind my back. If that's true, I'm gonna fuck you like a crazy bitch. Get the fuck out of my sight!
The next and last chapter is Rockstar Blaster, and it opens up with us planting a car bomb on one of the Rockstar's cars. After that, one of their leaders contacts us and he gives us the choice of working for them against Diva, and considering how much of a shit cunt Diva is, the choice is easy. Time to take out some rude boys. Rockstar Blaster pretty much plays the same as Bent Cop Blues, with the exception that you need 5 million points to finish it, and again the missions are just as long and brutal as the last chapter. Standout mission has to be this one where you follow this pimp Spinley Jim around, finding out where his hoes are. Once you find out where they're all located, you kill that Spinley fucker and go back to slap his bitches up to get him working for the Rusters. Having slapped them bitches pop up just caught me right off guard, and the faster you go hit them, the more points you get for your bitch slapping bonus. These hoes can fucking run though, it took me ages to catch this one.
Why are you running? Why are you running? You owe me money.
But this chapter is nothing new. You get the points, you meet with the boss of the Rusters who gives you a briefcase of money, and that's the end of GTA 1.
Hey, rude boy. Got the idea that you got the job done and thing. I'm just saying well done on that. Serious cash in the briefcase, you know. So, I don't think I'll be seeing you for a long time.
Now there was also a multiplayer mode for GTA, but it only consisted of deathmatch and street races for you to compete against your friends with. It was okay, but it was definitely not a massive draw to the game. But that's it for the first GTA game, and while it does have some pretty big flaws such as its awkward controls and bad graphics, it was, and still is, a pretty fun game to mess around on. The critics of the day thought so too, with most of them deducting points from it because of its graphics and controls, but still couldn't help talking about how fun the gameplay was. Its gameplay was very fresh and new at the time, and the whole concept of playing as a criminal killing cops for points was pretty damn out there. Other controversial games that came out before GTA, like Mortal Kombat, could easily shield themselves from criticism by saying that the violence was so over the top and unrealistic due to its setting. Games like Doom and Wolfenstein could also be defended by pointing out you were a good guy, killing Nazis or demons from hell. But GTA didn't fuck around. You are a criminal, and you need points to progress, and killing cops is one of the best ways to get those points. And by God, gamers ate that shit right up as well, with its sales in England alone reaching the 500,000 mark by the end of the Christmas season. That's despite its 18+ rating. Globally, it went over 1 million in that same Christmas season, which is massive for any game in 1997. It's estimated to have sold over 6 million copies over its life across all platforms, which is impressive given that unlike Lemmings, it was really only on the PC and PlayStation. It had some serious competition as well, with the PlayStation alone having Final Fantasy VII, Oddworld, and Symphony of the Night all coming out that year. The PC also had some heavy hitters that could have buried GTA's sales, with Quake 2, Diablo, Fallout, and Dungeon Keeper coming out that year and competing for shelf space, so the fact that a new IP like GTA sold that many copies despite its bad graphics is pretty damn impressive. There was a Game Boy Color port that released 2 years later in 1999, and it is surprisingly close to the original version, but obviously its graphics are basic and there are hardly any cars driving around, probably due to the Game Boy's technical limitations. The soundtrack also drove me pretty nuts pretty quick, especially since it's pretty much the only sound that there is in the game. It's a rough way to play GTA, but it does surprisingly stay faithful to the original, so I gotta give it points for that. So once GTA came out, DMA Design had another massive hit on their hands, and you would assume it would be just like Lemmings in the sense that it would be milk dry over the next few years. But GTA's fate was not quite that. The rights mainly belonged to BMG Interactive, and their parent company BMG was now slowly pulling out of the whole video games business. This is where the growing Take-Two Interactive steps in and decides to acquire BMG Interactive, picking up the rights to GTA. Take-Two wasn't a massive player in the video games world at this point, only really being known for full-motion video games that they published, with the standout being the somewhat infamous Ripper, starring Christopher Walken.
Unfucking believable.
But shortly after the deal with BMG went through, they spun up a new studio called Rockstar, and put a bunch of the old BMG Interactive crew in there to make a couple of expansion packs for Grand Theft Auto. And the result was Grand Theft Auto London 1969, which came out in late April 1999 on PC and PlayStation. As the name implies, it takes place in 1969 London, and it's broken up into 4 chapters, the first chapter being a short introduction, where you steal some mod scooter and get hired by 2 blokes known as the Crisp Brothers.
I've heard you're a bit tasty, no messing around or you get a slap. Remember, I'm the monkey and you're the cheese grater, so no messing around.
Every chapter takes place in the same map, and I actually really like this expansion, and not just because everyone drives on the correct side of the road. I find the writing hilarious with all the British and Cockney slang being thrown around, such as getting nicked by the cops or being brown bread instead of dead. The missions have you going around terrorising London, taking out nonces, ponces, and plonkers. These fucking red shirt North FC cons think they can come down here to South FC territory? Just a bit of banter! The streets are a bit more open, with less shit on the sidewalks for you to crash into, so driving around London is way more enjoyable than the American cities, which is kind of funny to say out loud. The missions are structured like the San Andreas missions, where they all have multiple objectives, but they aren't too long, so failing one right at the end isn't as devastating as failing a Vice City mission, which is good. Like mentioned before, you're doing missions for the Crisp Brothers, who are these 2 looks-maxers who over the missions you learn are digging a little too much into their own supply. You meet with them in person at the end of Chapter 3, and shit starts going downhill in Chapter 4 straight away, with them clearly going crazy. First they send you after the guy who recruited you in the first chapter, Harold Cartwright, accusing him of stealing one of the Crisp Brothers' personal supply of drugs. You kill the guy's whole family before finding and killing him, only for it to turn out that he probably didn't steal anything in the first place, but it doesn't matter because he was a useless prat anyway. Hey, wait a second, that guy recruited me.
No messing around or you get a slap.
Later on, you're tasked with killing a guy called Terry, and when you confront him, he tells you that the Crisp twins have become paranoid due to all the drugs they've been taking, and they plan to kill us. Unfortunately, you can't really spare him here, because I would have taken him up on his offer and joined him if the game let us.
Nice one, my beauty.
When we hit the 3,000 points we need to finish the chapter, we get a pager notification telling us the Crisp twins have flipped their shit and they're trying to leave London to get away from us. So it's time to take those motherfuckers out. I thought the best way to do it would be to grab a tank and run them over, so that's what I did, but somehow they survived that.
God, and Bennett, that was some firework. Look, there must have been some mistake, Flower. Well, look. Just so you don't come at us with a bleeding A-bomb next time, we're getting out of here. Arch is off to Devon, and I'm leaving the country. Heading for Thailand, actually. Very posh.
Yeah, an old British gangster going to Thailand because it's very posh? Nah, mate. We all know what you're going over there for, you dirty bastard. Look, no judgment from me. You wouldn't go to Japan and not eat sushi, would ya? But that's London 1969, and it's not a bad expansion, but you're not really missing out on too much by not getting it. They did release another mission pack online for players to download, set in London again, called 1961, but it's fucking brutal. It's one chapter, and the missions have a lot of stages to them, and often have super tight timers, so good luck getting through them. Also, you couldn't use save states on either of the London expansions without it bugging out, so I'll be real, I didn't finish 1961. But it did add a new multiplayer map of Manchester, but I really didn't want to figure out how to get multiplayer working, only to then have to find someone to actually play it with, so unfortunately, I can only really show you a picture of this map. 1961 was free, but you did need to have both GTA and its London expansion pack to get it working. Not only that, but when it went up, it went on the GTA 2 website in 1999, which was only a few months away, so I doubt a huge amount of people even knew about these expansions. But it was also in 1999 that Take-Two Interactive managed to acquire DMA from Gremlin Interactive, whose assets were being sold by their new parent company, Infogrames. Infogrames didn't want any connections to the GTA franchise at all, due to its controversy, so they sold Take-Two for £1. Now Take-Two did take on DMA's $12 million of debt they were in, so it wasn't quite the steal as it sounds, but it was from there that DMA would start working on GTA 3 and eventually be rebranded as Rockstar North, which changed the world of gaming forever, turning Rockstar Games and Take-Two Interactive into two absolute juggernauts in the industry. So that's the story of DMA Design and the first Grand Theft Auto game. A small group of young Scottish lads that just wanted to push the limits of their own personal computers for entertainment, who ended up creating two massive franchises in the 90s, with the family-friendly Lemmings becoming a staple puzzle game for the family PC, and then Grand Theft Auto evolving into the poster boy for video game controversy. A franchise that became a favourite target for lawyers and concerned parents that gave hours of fun for edgy teenagers such as myself. As of making this video, GTA 1 and 2 are considered freeware. Rockstar put them both out for free to download all the way back in 2004. While the website that you could download them from is no longer up, there are plenty of other places you can download it and get them working pretty easily using an emulator like DOSBox. You know, that is until Rockstar inevitably remakes them both into some sort of GTA Classic Definitive Edition, outsourced to some random studio where none of the animations work properly, the gameplay is broken beyond repair, and is sold for $80
What the hell is even that?
Anyway, GTA 1 took me about 12 to 15 hours to finish, and the London 1969 expansion pack added about 4 hours to that. So there is a lot of content here to jump into, regardless if you have or haven't played it before. It is a bit rough around the edges, but it is still a lot of fun once you get the feel of the game. I'm sure for those of you that did play it when it first came out probably have some memories of seeing it for the first time either at a friend's house or from a demo disc, and were blown away that you were playing a game that just let you kill cops and innocent pedestrians. And you probably had your own parents, or maybe some of your friends' parents, get on their soapbox and try to convince all the other adults in your life that you shouldn't be allowed to play it. It's crazy to see how the series has evolved over the years, and I don't think many people expected it to just keep snowballing into one of the biggest game series ever, so it's interesting to see where it all started. Anyway, that's all for this video. Knowing my upload schedule, I'll see you all again in 5 years, so like, subscribe, and take it easy.
Hey, pretty boy, you done real good for me, no? Now it's time for you to find out why they call me the donkey, huh? Ha ha! I'm gonna reward you personal this time.